Welcome back to the Hannibal TV. UFO Tarheel Casey here. If you see some plumage, I'm at a local cigar lounge that I seem to frequent if it's going to be nice and peaceful here. But back with me is Pavel from Psychoactivo. If you're not subscribing to that channel yet, you need to go over there and subscribe to it because there's a lot of good content coming out. I try to stay up with you, Pavel, because there's so much changing just this week alone, right?
Oh
You know,
yeah, it's a lot. A lot is happening right now.
I mean the Jake and the Skywatcher announcement that was pretty
Yeah,
big. I mean, I know we're going to talk more Nazca Mummies on this one. We want to catch some people up. I've not been as well versed to it as what I would be in like ufology, but the two
yeah.
seem to have some common stream there. But if we want to just talk for a second, just on some of this week's happenings, I mean, do you think there's anything bigger than the Skywatcher announcement this week?
Well, there's the Archives of the Impossible event at Rice University this week. Right now, there are lectures going on there. There was a Carl Nell lecture. There was a Dr. Gary Nola lecture. Dr. Jeffrey Kreipel obviously is going to be talking to the people. And I love that initiative of of the Impossible because it's like a repository of all of the investigation into phenomena in general, not just
Mm-hmm.
UFOs. And that's one of the most interesting initiatives that are happening right now and have been happening for a while. And funny enough, Dr. Kreipel is actually kind of connected to the whole Skywatcher team thing because he wrote the book about Esalen, which is where Jake Barber and Dave Grush and Ross Coulthard were last year at that event of the high net worth people that Ross talks about.
Yeah.
He wrote the book about the place, so he knows some of the what's going on over there. So yeah, but yeah, the Jake Barber stuff is the most interesting because they're being very thorough with what
Yeah.
they're doing.
Seems so.
Whatever the result is, I think that that paper that they just released is very thorough and very specific, and I think that's a good thing. It's way more than we've gotten from either Arrow or whatever the government is doing. You know?
I heard Arrow visited them on site,
Yeah, yeah,
Skywatcher.
they did, they did.
So I
Yeah,
mean that gives them some clout too, right? Because if Arrow is, I mean, if Arrow came out and announced that they were going to spend a weekend with the Tedeschi brothers or something like that, it would immediately bring their stock up even more. But then with someone like Skywatcher, they're a little newer to the scene. You know, the Tedeschi brothers were kind of got big during the drones, right? Because they were trying to track the skies a little better. But Skywatcher, I mean, if they say that they have video they're going to show of a Tic Tac going from 80,000 down, I mean that'll be big. But I do agree with you. They're being very careful in their approach. They're not just.
yep,
It's not all about the cinema.
yep. And we have to also consider because I already know that there's a lot of people that are not going to like the footage because it's not close up footage. That's not how this works. It's historically pretty damn difficult to record one of these things. So, um, we have to take under consideration a bunch of things and all of the different types of uh, measurements they use and the spectrum that they use to record and different data points, different angles, different sensors, all of that. And when you combine them, that's what makes a UFO case interesting. When you
Yeah,
have like different types of data points and corroborations, and that's what I think
true.
people that are new to the topic maybe don't get. And it's nice to keep like repeating it to them because getting close up footage of a UFO, if that exists, that's the most classified stuff that we're gonna see, and
Plus, how
that's gonna be
evasive they can be, right? You know,
yeah.
how evasive. I don't know of a technology we have that would be open to a team like Skywatcher. I'm sure maybe something might be inside government that would do that, but and the only other thing I would say is that his claim to Coltart was, and I think it was Coltart, um, Matthew Pines, if I'm not mistaken, and then
Yeah,
it was Jay Barber, right? And he made the claim that this dog whistle um, that apparently brings them in was successful 100% of the time.
That's
Did you
wild.
hear that?
Yeah. I
Uh,
I I was like, damn, so we are gonna get something.
I mean, you can't set up something now and say, well, they may or may not show up. Well, dude, you just said they come
Yep.
100% of the time. So
Yep.
that's pretty wild. But yeah,
Uh,
anything else coming on this week or coming up for you next week that you wanted to cover before we get started on?
Well, I did have 3 interviews this week. I had an interview with my good friend Clint Weldon from Night Shift, who's like, he has a show that is like, it gives me a lot of Art Bell vibes because he takes calls and he speaks to people, not just to like specialists or anything like that. And I love that about that channel because
Yeah.
it gets all of the viewers way more involved than most of the channels. I don't have like that feature on my channel yet. I don't know if I'm gonna do it because that's kind of his thing. And I also spoke to Chrissy Newton and to Jeff Nucitelli. Um, to those who don't know who those are, Chrissy is a journalist at the Debrief, and she has a podcast called Rebelliously Curious, and she's like one of the best in the field, both men and
Okay.
women. And Nucitelli is an Air Force veteran who famously reported on the giant, massive red square UFO that was mentioned at the hearings in 2023. So he talks about it in detail
Is that
in the
Vandenberg?
interview. Yes, Vandenberg Air Force
Okay.
Base in California. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I had watched some of the recent interviews on that. And I thought that was interesting as well. I know that some in Congress have even asked about that, right? I think Paulina Luna during one of the hearings asked about the Vandenberg incident. Um, but yeah, I mean, and see what I'm saying though. I mean, it's so hard week to week to just keep up with
Yeah.
what's changed, who said what, what's coming. So again, that's what we try to cover here on the Hannibal TV is like trying to keep people up on that because we have such short memories, but at the same time, stuff is changing every
Oh, yeah.
week. So when you clash those two together, it's just impossible to keep up with. And again, 20 years ago, we weren't getting anything. There was nothing going on. Again, there might be a Stephen Greer documentary that would pop up, but other than that, there was really not much happening in this space. And I used to think to myself 20 years ago, man, I wish there'd be some more content. You're out on YouTube looking around, no one's putting out content. You don't see anything. You hit Amazon Prime and you're looking for some documentaries, and most of them are pretty bad.
Yeah.
And now you just be careful what you ask for because we're drinking
Yeah.
from the fire hose.
And it's only going to keep growing, man. So
Yeah.
even as a full-time job doing this, which I am doing, it's really difficult to keep up on a
Yeah.
daily basis. It's really difficult. So,
Well, that's
and
why
I,
I wanted to catch up some of the people on the topic because you and I have had some discussion about it. But let's first take some people in through what happened. And if I'm not mistaken, the discovery happened in 2015, right, in Peru?
2014,
2014.
2014. Yeah.
And that was it. It was, correct me if I'm wrong. It was an illegal operation, right? They were digging in
Yeah.
areas or digging up things they shouldn't be, right?
There's
And that's how.
still there's still a lot of illegal stuff going on, and I'll tell
Okay.
you about it. I'll tell you about it because there's like a culture of creating artifacts of the area and the region that are like fake. And then there's the culture of the huaqueros, which is like kind of like a mafia, where they are the ones that control all of the tombs and all that stuff, and they constantly raid them. And when they discover something, those guys are usually the first ones there. So it becomes like a really complicated relationship between that mafia and the Peruvian government. And
Okay.
you can think that just kind of like going to South Central LA, which is like a really violent neighborhood in Los Angeles. There's not a lot of cops there because they know that it's a dangerous place to be,
Yeah. Why risk
and
it?
it's very similar there in Peru. Um, if you're like someone from the government or a cop, you know that there are places you can't really go to without getting into some trouble. So
That makes sense. And I mean, that's why I wanted to ask about that with the Nazca Mummies is Um, I think that's maybe the origination of it is what had people skeptical at first, is where they came from.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but however else they were found, initially the reports came out that I saw, you know, skeletal pieces of different things being put together to create these things. They're almost like a recreation. But if I'm pronouncing it right, it was Dr. Piotti that you had on, right? Um,
Yeah.
and he did the measurements though, and I was very interested in him talking about actual skeletal measurements. And even in the interview you did with him, this guy lives and breathes that stuff. I mean, he's talking
Yeah.
about falling asleep with bones in his hand because he had glued them together and didn't want them to fall apart.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff takes commitment, and when you have someone like that, like you had on to talk about it, it's very convincing.
Yeah. And Piotr came into the picture a little later.
Yeah.
Um, the ones who discovered the mummies were one of the Huaqueros, who is now famous. His name is Mario. Well, it's his like a nickname. That's not his real name. And the French explorer who is like the boss at the Incari Institute in Cusco, Peru. His name is Thierry Jamon. And those are the ones who discovered the bodies first. And then Jaime Maussan came into the picture like in 2017, something like that. And that's when a lot of this really started. And that's when there was like a division between two factions, because there's Maussan, who came in with all of the power that he has, because in Latin America he's like the most renowned and famous ufologist, one of the most famous in the world, and he also comes with a lot of infrastructure and power to do whatever he wants. So when he found out that this discovery had something to it, he went to Peru and he kind of took over the case in many ways. And Thierry has been doing his thing. They initially collaborated, but they had some differences, so they went separate ways. And there are two efforts basically right now trying to get to the bottom of what these bodies are. And what we can say right now is confidently is that based on the carbon dating, the DNA analysis, and the morphology analysis, is that the bodies that are bigger, that are like kind of our size, those were living beings at a certain point, about between
Okay.
1700 and 2000 years ago. And they do have tridactyl features in their hands and feet, and those are naturally there. They weren't either tampered with, and they weren't like superimposed there or anything like that. They did they were born with those three
So
fingers in
who
their.
is leading that determination that these were born that way? They were not manipulated with at all. Is that Peyote? Did he help with that, or was it like
He
a
helped
group of scientists?
he helped with a part of that, yeah. But
Okay.
there are like, he's an anthropologist, right? But there are other anthropologists who have looked at these bodies. One of them is Dr. Roger Zuniga, who is part of the other effort associated with Maussan at Ica University, and he's the one leading the effort there. And he's a scientist, so the ones who are making these determinations are specialists in the area that I'm telling you about.
Okay.
um so that's how we got there. And just last year, I think it was November, there was a hearing in Peru where two doctors, there are specialists in MRI studies, they determined that the bodies had natural tridactyl features in a Congress hearing. So that's official.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what really interested me is getting someone in there, like you said, an anthropologist, someone who is well versed at um, looking at skeletal structures,
Yeah.
not only measuring them but understanding impacts they had to them. Even you get into it with Peyote about talking about um, maybe range of motion and things that they did or certain acts they were able to perform. I mean, he can get very detailed as to like what
Oh
these
yeah.
bodies were capable of, just from looking at them. And I think that's where it took me into a different area. It's like, okay, if I start out on the level of these could have been pieced together. But then you hear someone like that, like Pialti,
Yeah.
talking about, no, not from anything I've seen. No, these were actually, uh, living beings. And
Yeah.
I like that he's not attached to ufology. He
No.
answers you a couple times, and he's like, I've never got into that. I don't know a lot about spaceships and everything else. So I
He
like that
has
he,
seen, he has recorded and seen UFOs though.
yeah,
He showed me pictures, but he's not attached to it. You're right. But
yeah,
he
that's not
yeah, no,
his
it's not.
tilt is not coming into this with the hypothesis of this has to
Yeah.
be alien. That doesn't. I don't think that was his hypothesis.
You
His
know,
hypothesis.
I think he understands that he's a scientist, so he can't really get too cookie with what he says, you know?
Yeah,
And but what interested me the most about Piotr, and the reason I started talking to him, was that in the 2023 hearing, where Jaime presented the mummies, Jaime Maussan in Mexico, they invited him, and they flew him over with his wife, and he presented there. And initially, when I saw him there, I thought he was part of Jaime's team. He
yeah,
wasn't. He saw the initial scans of the bodies, and he was really excited because what he did, and his specialist, he's a specialist on craniometry measurements specifically. So he knows when he sees an Australopithecus brain, or a skull, sorry, he knows that it's an Australopithecus. When he sees an Homo habilis, he knows what it is. When he sees an Homo sapiens brain, he knows what it is based on the measurements of angles that he's
right.
been doing his entire life. And when he measured those, he was like, these are more evolved than us. Therefore,
Mm,
these appeared to come or be from the future because they seem to be our descendants. And I was
mm.
like, did he just say what I thought he said in
Well,
Congress? I was like, whoa, that's wild.
but can you imagine being in his position where you can make that statement, but then him have to back out of it because of how it may be perceived? I mean, he can't help if something appears a certain way, and he wants to report on that. So if the science leads him to make that kind of statement, he's got to make it. And that's the
Yeah,
way I look at it. Is that if it looks like something that is you know when you see the stingray and they say that appears to be what used to be a shark, and the shark went through some type of evolution in maybe a specific area of the world. There were some sharks that went through some type of evolution, and they began to look ray like. Um, if he sees something like that in his field and it looks like it follows a timeline, I mean, we all know in ufology that that's part of the conversation, right? Is
yeah,
are these are these us from the future, and they figured out a way to come back? And if they did they get stuck here and die in a cave somewhere? But
yeah.
how many bodies was it total? Remind me again.
Well, this gets really convoluted, so I'm gonna try to be as clear as possible because there's
Yeah.
been a lot of misinformation about the case, and because there's a lot of people that don't like Jaime Maussan, and I think that they've like purposely tried to tamper with what he's been doing. And there is a set of bodies that were created recently, like in the last decade or so, that were created in order to like obfuscate the whole case.
Hmm.
But when they found the bodies, the real ones, they found that, and this is the a running hypothesis that I have. I don't think that the small bodies that Jaime presented were real bodies, are real bodies. Dr. Piotti thinks so, but um, I think they're like really old too, but they seem to be like put together from different animal parts and stuff like that, as like a some kind of like a homage, or like a
Hmm.
um, to the larger bodies that were also found there, which are the ones that are real.
Yeah,
You know?
that's where I'm trying to find out, and like even for those who will be listening to this, we saw the ones that came out, and it's the ones that Ryan Graves didn't want to stand in front of, right? Or he didn't want to be pictured
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
And didn't those look like the ones from ET the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Or
they look.
the Close Encounters from the Third Kind. That's more similar, even.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think there is some, you've seen the memes online about it, and things like that. But I'm not as much talking about those. I'm talking about the ones that are actually in the fetal position or whatever.
Yeah.
And you even think that there's one or two that are even more convincing, and they've given them names, right?
Yeah.
One of the names.
Maria is the most famous one.
Hmm.
Uh, there's also Sebastian, which is like it appears to be a prepubescent child. Um, and he's also like sitting down, kind of. It's not a fetal position per se. He's like more like on a meditative position.
Okay.
But the most compelling for me is the one that is pregnant, because that is her name is Montserrat, and I've seen the MRI um, images of the fetus, and there's a part where you can see the little hand of the
Hmm.
fetus and the little arm, the femur, and everything, and it has three fingers inside of the wound.
Wow.
So that's wild to me. That's like, how can you, if you guys keep saying that this is fake and that this is like made up, how can you fake that? A
Yeah.
fetus like that, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it's impossible to do that. So
And especially if you get science on the side of it. And I mean, that's what um, we we're talking about, how people are waiting around for America to expose certain things. I've challenged this question to Ross Coulthard. He's responded to me a couple times. I pitched it even to George Knapp, and he responded to me as well. Why are we waiting on America? This is not an American phenomenon. No one has ever said that what we're dealing with is an American phenomenon. Just talking about not just with these mummies, anything inside of the realm of ufology. So, when another country or another continent has something happen like this, like in Peru and South America, um, and science gets behind it, where science won't get behind what we're doing here, right? And if
yeah,
and if they do, no one pays attention to him. Like Dr. Gary Nolan, he's science, right? I mean, I would put him. I know a lot of people say no, he's more academia, and I'm like, well, then you don't look at his work, because
oh no,
you're not just academia and doing the work he's doing. So he's in the scientific community as well as academia, but
yeah,
he gets behind things, and you know people don't really pay attention to him that much. So, as far as people outside of the realm, like not like me and you may listen to Dr. Nolan, but some people on the outside may, yeah, he's probably just another one of these like Avi Loeb. These are people who want to get grants. They look at it that way. These are people just fighting for grant money, right? And that's what it gets passed off at, is here in America. But here you have South America, and you have the scientific community actually getting behind it and saying, no, there's something here. And is the holdup, or what people's perception of it? Is it just the fact that there's not been enough American intervention, like of our scientific community? Or I tried to look and see if anyone from here, and all I could find was some defense attorney that came down there and looked at them, and he did the fingerprints, right?
yeah,
He found the straight line fingerprints or something, and
yeah,
even he said that they were real fingerprints, but they weren't anything like he's seen before. I didn't know if you read the
yeah,
article about that.
yeah. I did, from Josh um,
I can't think of his name either.
McDowell, Josh McDowell, and his father is actually he used to be the director of the American Forensic Society. I'm not sure what it's called, but
I didn't
he's
know
like
that.
really big, Dr. John McDowell, and he's
Okay.
like the leading American scientist that is helping Jaime Maussan on this
Okay.
on his side, because Jaime has resources and everything. And the thing is that there's a lot of debate on whether on the reason why the US effort of disclosure is not even paying attention to this. I can tell you whatever I think may be happening, but there's people that won't agree with me because from my perspective, I think that whatever the US is doing in terms of disclosure, they don't want anything else like getting conflated with what they're trying to do. So they're not
Okay.
paying attention to other topics. They're focused on this disclosure plan that they're like putting together.
So they just don't want the distraction.
Yeah, that's what I think. But there's people that are going to tell you that there's even racism involved in this, and that they just don't like it that Latin America is like leading in part of this. Because if you think about it, they've been clamoring for evidence for decades in the U.S. and ufology in general, and there's very little physical evidence that we can actually account for. Very little.
A few pieces of metal that
Yeah.
that Dr. Nolan shows, and
Meanwhile, in Peru, there's bodies,
yeah, I
and
mean,
they've been confirmed to be real. The thing is, I still struggle to like make the connection between the UFOs and these bodies specifically.
yeah.
As far as I've gone so far is, and this is where me and Dr. Piotti differ because Dr. Piotti is still investigating, and he still thinks that these came from the future somehow. I don't think that's the case. I think that before the Younger Dryas period, about 12,500 years ago, it's possible, it's probable that there was more like diversity amongst hominids. And then all of these cataclysms happened, and some of them, I think, that may have gone underground, you know, and that's where they reside. So it's possible that they're like
Just
a
your
more evolved,
run of the mill
um,
troglodytes, right?
yeah, a more evolved species than us,
Yeah.
but that they had to go underground. And I don't know. I don't even know if it was necessarily during the Younger Dryas period. It may have been way before that because Dr. Piotti is talking about how more evolved than us they are, and he says it's like millions of years more evolved than us based on the craniometry measurements. So I don't know. That kind of
What do you think?
supports.
So, what do you think though when you
Yeah.
have people come out and they say, "But people stretch their skulls now"? What's the one tribe they always like to show when it comes to the mummies, and they put the bands on their head and they can stretch their
I'm not sure
neck?
it's from Ethiopia. I'm not sure.
It's
But
a
yeah, yeah, I know what you're
You know what
talking
I'm
about
talking
now.
about because they always show that and they say, this could just be, some type of practice like that. There's the one with the neck. There's the one where you add the rings
I,
to the
I
neck and they can stretch their neck, for
I
example.
would accept that if they didn't have three fingers and three toes.
Yeah,
You know, that's
yeah.
like kind of like the game
Hard to
changer
get
to
around
me.
that.
Yeah, it's like okay, but what about the three fingers and three toes? That how'd that happen?
Yeah,
you know?
they cut that out of the documentary. That part.
Yeah, and it's like really unfortunate because you mentioned when Ryan Graves was at the hearing in Mexico and he didn't want to be photographed with the
Right.
bodies, right? And as I tell you, I still have my doubts about those little ones. I don't think they were living creatures before, but I'm open to get my mind changed when I see more data about them. But so far, I think those were constructed ancient constructions, and the bigger ones are real.
So
But
Peyote did look at those,
yeah, and he looked at both, and
and
Piotti thinks they were real. That and the reason he says that though is because in the 90s he claims that he saw one living,
okay. And
and
see, and see, that's what I'm saying though. Do you think that hurts him? Like, even with someone like yourself, who you don't think the small ones are, and he does. I mean, do you think that would discredit him with people trying to buy the story where they say, well, even the ones that we don't think are real, he thinks they are. So we just
well,
throw out the rest of his claims.
what he and I guess he's right because this is what every scientist should do. He tells me I looked at the data and this is
Yeah.
what the data is telling me. And
Okay.
if I get someone who comes with the data who's also a specialist like me and shows me that I'm wrong, I
He
will
said he'd
accept
be
that.
open to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember him
Uh,
telling you he don't. I remember him making the statement of like, I don't give people time of day if they just
Yeah.
throw throw my information, in the garbage without doing their own, But as a scientist, he's open to the scientific community. So
And that's how scientists work. Usually, Nolan is exactly like
right,
that too. He's like, okay, have you done the research? Are
yeah,
you a specialist like me? Then I don't want to talk to you. I don't value your opinion. That's a
and
little bit elitist, but
but no one usually shows up with anything, right? So I mean,
yeah,
we're kind of
yeah.
a party of one when it
They
comes
have
to
they
this
have
kind
a
of stuff.
right to be like that. I think because I mean,
There's just no one else.
Pioti Pioti invented the specialty of morphological anthropology in Argentina. So the dude is credentialed. So
Yeah,
disputing him kind of becomes a chore.
yeah. No, I wouldn't want to. I mean, but um, have there been any other credible people step forward that we don't know about that we need to look into that have reviewed the case of the mummies?
Yeah, we have she's a data scientist named Alina Hardy. I had her on the show. Um, and she's been doing quite impressive work with the other effort that I'm telling you about.
Yeah.
That's her. She came forward last year, so it's okay for me to say her name. But I find that something is happening that I don't like about English speaking scientists who want to look at this.
Hmm.
They want to be anonymous when they're looking at the mummies because they're afraid that their careers will take a turn that will eventually ruin their careers, you know?
Hmm.
And, but I don't like that. And I've always disputed this from scientists that do want to come forward and want to do it anonymously. And I tell them, it's like, dude, there are scientists in Latin America who've already put their names out there and they're like risking their careers by doing this. They know this. And you're here telling me that you don't want to risk it when a lot of other scientists already risked it. So I don't like that.
Well, and so tell me this, and there's not anybody involved in this um, that would be like this. Do you think they're looking at the situation that happened with Dr. Nolan and Dr. Greer when Nolan was on Dr. Greer's documentary
Yeah.
with the small body, right? And I think his findings, what was that one that was, it wasn't unacknowledged. I cannot
I
think of the
think
name of that
uh
documentary. It's one of the Greer
I think it's
documentaries.
the serious one, I think. I'm
Serious.
not sure.
I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think it is serious. But he pretty much didn't find any conclusive evidence, right? He found a couple anomalies, it seems like, but he
He
didn't.
claims that it's a child that is deformed. That's
Yes,
that's his conclusion. And
but Dr. Greer is trying to say that he was told to say that
yeah.
because he's pretty much a CIA asset, right?
Yeah, and he's been accused of that for a while now. I'm not sure what to think of that. I honestly, I think Dr. Nolan is way more credible than Dr. Greer
Well, yeah.
in many respects. So I prefer to take Dr. Nolan for his word.
But do
But
you think people see that
yeah,
interaction that happened and they don't want to step on in this one because they're like, here's
yeah,
Dr.
of
Nolan,
course,
someone who could be
it's
up for the.
it's very toxic. It happens with every case that seems toxic in ufology. That happens a lot. There's a lot of people that are very serious that are curious about many of these topics, but when they see something that is really, really toxic, they just stay away from it.
Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. So,
Well, and that's
um,
why I was wondering, do you think there's any of those players um, down there handling this that, like Masan, that would, you know, potentially do something like that where they feel like they've seen something? And do you think he would accept real sign? For example, Piatti, if he, Masan paid for him to come in, he flew him and his wife out there. He was very gracious. What if he would have turned around and said, "No, these are these are reconstructions, and I can show you"? Do you think Masan would have accepted that?
no, and he hasn't accepted that because this being ancient constructions, he doesn't think that. He thinks the little ones are were once living beings. Um, because he has his own scientists as well. He has biologist Ricardo Rangel. He has the Mexican Navy Doctor Jose Salce.
Mhm.
Um, he's what is he? I'm not sure if he's an anthropologist too, but he has a number of them, and he's basing his opinions on their data. But there's a bunch of scientists already from other countries that have looked at the images and the data, the carbon dating and DNA data, and they claim that the little bodies are ancient constructions. And I've seen some of that data, and right now I incline myself to think that. But
Yeah.
as I told you before, I'm open to changing my mind. And Dr. Piotti and I talk about this, and I tell him that I still think that, and he doesn't like it, but he understands. He's like, yeah, well, you will know, you will see what I see in due time. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, because like that's why I'm wondering, um, you know, ha- did I hear this wrong, or is there a plan for them to bring them here? Um,
Well, that depends because Jaime Maussan had a lawsuit that was like $300 million against the Peruvian government because he claims that they obstructed the investigation and that they even concealed information that should be like a right for the people to know. And the lawsuit is right now like kind of stalled. That's what provoked the government to have a hearing last year because they realized that Jaime was serious about it and the case was kind of inclining towards Jaime's favor,
mhm.
and that's when they decided to start taking it more seriously. I'm not sure right now because I haven't had any confirmation, but they're trying to get more hearings both in Peru and in Mexico to talk about the bodies. And Jaime just like opened a massive television channel in Mexico, where he's like, that's like his centerpiece of information, the mummies.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know. I thought I'd heard something about him trying to bring him here, because they did do a news conference here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I
Uh,
thought I'd
Well,
saw that live
he
stream.
does he does have a couple of bodies here in Mexico of the little ones,
Hmm.
but the big ones are still in Peru. They haven't
Okay.
left Peru, and I don't think they will leave until there is like a resolution from the government because the government needs to acknowledge that they're real. They haven't done that yet. There were hearings and there were scientists talking about the bodies being real at the hearings, but we still need like an official confirmation from the Peruvian government. Because if they keep saying that they're not real or that they are human bodies, that are mutilated or stuff like that, that gets into a lot of legal trouble for the people that are involved investigating this because those claims mean that there's like desecration even involved. So that's really grave accusations to level against someone. That's like violating the cultural heritage of a country. So that can get people in jail. That's why Jaime decided to go through with the lawsuit because he obviously didn't want to get in trouble for that. So, and that's the way it's progressing right now. We need confirmation in order to get the bodies out. That's
I wonder if there's
that's the
any
reality.
precedents for this then. I mean, has anyone tried to move? I'm sure someone has found mummies before, right? Or some type
Yeah,
of mummification and tried to remove it from the country.
yeah.
Um, I mean, is this something that is just it's new to this region and they've not dealt with? Like, I'm sure they dealt with this in like
I mean,
Egypt.
Egypt has a lot of history with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but and here in this continent, the Paracas skulls are also like a major point of interest with that. And there's people that claim they're not real. There's people that claim they are. But in terms of like trying to move them and all that stuff, yeah, it's relatively new over the last decade or so. Yeah.
So it's just they probably are. trying to figure out a process to this
Yeah,
as much as discovery, recognition. Um,
yeah.
how many more years ahead do you think this is then, where it's still kind of stuck in this phase that
I
it's in?
I am confident that either by the end of this year or the start of 2026, we're going to get more compelling information out of new studies that are being conducted. Um, that's all I can say for now, but I am confident that we will get um, that information. And when it comes out, it's going to kind of shock a lot of people because when I spoke, for example, with Thierry, I spoke to him on the channel too. He uh, made me corroborate information that I had from Timothy Alberino about this area in Cusco. They put LiDAR technology on that area, and they realized that there's like a massive tunnel system connecting a bunch of different sites around the region. So, and that's where presumably a lot of these bodies were found because there's like dozens of bodies there. That's the claim. They've only taken out a few, but they claim that there are a bunch of them.
Now, did you
And
say that's in the same area?
yeah, it's around Nazca, Cusco, all of that area, right around there. Yeah.
Is anyone allowed in and around there? Like, could you go visit there if you wanted
As
to?
I told you at the beginning, though, it's kind of controlled by the mafia
Oh,
there.
that's right. You may not even want
So
to go there.
no, they're always armed, and it's really, really dangerous. It's like going to the valleys of Sinaloa where they're planting all that stuff. If you go there, you're probably not
You're not
getting
coming
out.
back. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Hmm. What a what an interesting place to find these things. Where
yeah,
we can't really get in, and that's going to lock science out.
yeah,
So that's going to put a lid on it as well, because I think that was one of the other questions I see come up is, you know, it's two or three bodies today. What if it's, to your point, 10 or 15 bodies later this year, next year? At what point does it reach that where it's just undeniable now? Like, people can't just shuffle it off to the side anymore. It's almost like the beginnings of ufology, right? Kenneth Arnold, wasn't he the first one to see the discs, or to call them flying discs?
yeah.
Um, and that was what, in the 30s, 40s. I don't know. He was like flying out,
40s.
yeah,
Yeah,
flying out west, and he was in, you know, at altitude and saw the discs, and that's where this came from. But you know, no one thought much. They reported it, and then things started accumulating. I didn't know if that was going to be the situation here, because just like in Egypt or any site where they start finding things, it's never just one thing they find or
no,
two things. Next thing you know, there's an entire area that's being dug
yeah,
up and things found that you just can't sweep under the rug anymore.
yeah. That's how they dug up like cities, entire cities that were buried. Um, I think the Karnak temple in Egypt, it's relatively one of the most recent, and Gobekli Tepe in Turkey is another one that is very recent. That's an underground city, dude. And we're just gonna keep finding stuff like this if we don't blow ourselves up in the
Yeah,
planet before that happens.
yeah, I know. But who has the access? If it's the mafia that has control there, who have they blessed to be able to come around these areas?
What the way they've been doing it right now is through Mario only. Mario knows the location of the site, and he only told one other person that is his collaborator, and all of the official people involved that are not Waqueros, they don't know where the site is. They have an idea, but they don't know for sure where it is. And there are like rumors that some of them, of the official people, have already been at the site. I'm not able to corroborate that in any way. I've asked them, but they've always been like cryptic or haven't told me anything really, because it's like really secretive. If it's as important as it seems, that site needs to stay secret.
Yeah, yeah. Well, And I mean, how many things has happened in South America, and the story we're told is the Americans get the evidence, right? With Virginia,
Oh yeah,
you remember everything that was reported there, even in James Fox's documentary. They say USAF took everything away. USAF,
yeah,
United States Air Force. All they remembered was the insignia on the plane saying USAF, and then it was all gone. That's something else that makes me wonder is like, you know, is this being cut off like that because they don't want to see something like that happen again? Like this, where actually like mafia is doing something good, where they might say, look, this is ours. We're indigenous to this area, not some fucking Americans.
yeah,
They're just going to go take it and mess with it and, make it part of some slander game. Are they protecting it?
yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I think also Five Eyes don't pay attention to this, because they kind of know that they can't really just waltz in there and just take everything.
Just take it. Yeah.
It's gonna get gnarly. And this also kind of makes me think of that phenomenon that happened a couple of years back that Tim Alberino also reported on. Have you heard of the pela cara phenomenon, which is like
Mm-mm.
the face peelers? There was like a small town in Peru where there were like attacks of a. They initially they thought they were like aliens on like UFOs, but um, Alberino went to interview people who suffered attacks from these things
Mm-hmm.
that they didn't know, that pelacaras they called them. And um, a little girl told him that when they were like close to her, she heard an American accent English, and she also heard a Peruvian person, uh, and she claims that they had like this like really advanced technology that helped them hover over the ground, and they had suits. It was really weird. So if there are Americans with like advanced technology in the area doing who knows what, you could think that they may be like trying to look for stuff there too.
Well, were there cattle mutilations and things like that in South America?
What I heard is that the reason they call them pelacaras is because they do something to people and in their face, and there were like unconfirmed reported deaths, but
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been able to confirm them either way.
Yeah.
um and that's why they call them that, because they it's very similar to the cattle mutilations, but allegedly, and as I told you, I'm not able to confirm this, they did it to humans.
Well, that's why I'm asking that is because we've been told by Rick Doty types that those were all coordinated campaigns by our government to either scare people or shock people, and maybe they won't sniff around this phenomena if they think they could get their face or cow or face
Yeah,
peeled off or their cow peeled down or something like that. So
yeah,
I'm just wondering, you saying that there was an English accent in someone.
American.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, American
Yeah,
accent. That, yeah, you have to make that distinction, right?
yeah,
But American accent, it just makes me wonder that it's like maybe they were running campaigns there as well,
yeah. And
on the
this is
people.
what Tim told me, and I also spoke to Joyce Mantilla, who is like also part of Jaime Maussan's team, who's the journalist leading the investigation in Peru. And he told me the same thing. He was like, I interviewed the people, and they told me that they heard American accents. And I was like, okay. So I got two different uh, corroborations from investigators and explorers that, well, Tim, right?
Tim who?
Timothy Alberino. He's like famous in the space. He's in ufology, but he likes going to megalithic sites and investigate them, and he
I
knows
probably know him if
everybody
I
in
saw him. Yeah,
ufology. Yeah,
I probably
uh,
looked at his stuff, but yeah, that's what you know. I think holds back some of these stories as well is because of access, and then has there already been some government involvement and they just don't want you to know about it? And
yeah, it's
what were their campaigns to throw you off the scent? Were there campaigns to scare people away from certain sites? And those were done in concert with local governments.
it's entirely possible, man. And
Yep.
I think, yeah, that at least at some level must happen. I think.
Yeah. Well, we got a little bit of time left. I'm hoping that caught up a lot of the audience that has been asking questions about the mummies. I know we get them every now and then, and people don't know what to follow, right? Because
Yeah,
we're in a world of the Google search bar, and
yeah,
people are going to go there. They're going to put in Nazca Mummies. The first hit might be something that says they were just a constructed doll. I've seen that, and then
yeah,
the very next article is very scientific, and it's like, no, this there is something there. So it's very hard to like cut through all the shit with it, right? You don't know what to exactly cover, and I think that's what makes me even more intrigued by it is when there's so much noise as well, you have to look and find out where the noise is coming from. Like
yeah.
why are we trying to throw so much noise in there? Um, what what is the use in discrediting this story? The same as with what we did with the ufology. Why is there
Yeah,
so much concerted effort to discredit it?
that still puzzles me to this day, man.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can do as a response to that is that there's people that are doing serious work, and they're putting it at open source websites where you can go in and you can register, or yeah, you can register, and they'll show you the actual data coming from the source, and you can be an investigator. I have a friend who helps me with many of these translations in AI. His
Mm-hmm.
name is Gonzalo Chavez. He's been helping the effort from Jaime's side, and he actually created an information repository where a lot of people can go in there and can register and get all the data, the DICOM files, which is like the MRI actual images where you can turn all the image and stuff. You got that there. So that's the data that people who really want to look into it should look at. The site is called tridactyls.org.
Tridactyls. Okay.
Tridactyls.org. And there's another one that preceded this one that Thierry Jaman is the one who created it. And it's called the alienproject.com. That's where they have the very first MRI videos. And that one is also really, really good. That one doesn't have the DICOM data, but I'm trying to
Okay.
convince them to release them too.
Yeah, I'm like making note of it right now because I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, you're gonna be blown away, especially with what Gonzalo has done, man. He writes code and he creates websites. No, that's a different one.
Okay. See, that's why I wanted to clear it up with you.
Hold on.
Tridactyls.org.
Yeah.
There it is. Don't go to tridactyls.com. Now, Pavel
No,
may
that
have said that.
actually the tridactyls.com is another guy who's like
Okay.
he's
Okay.
good at what he does too. So but he has the constant companion theory is its name. And it's an interesting theory, but there's a lot of debate around it. So, but he does a lot of good work too. So he's serious about the tridactyls as well. But the one is like the real one that I'm telling you about is like tridactyls.org.
Yeah, I like it because I can already see where you can go body by body.
Yep.
So if it is Montserrat or
And you got it
Maria,
in English and in Spanish. So that's
very cool.
perfect. Yeah.
So there, everyone listening, you know where you can go check it out. You can go read the evidence yourself. I think that's neat. We have a few more minutes. Were there anything else that we wanted to talk about today? Because again, we know there's a lot going on in ufology. Um, I know there was the Skywalker announcement, right? Um, and when I was looking through the feed, I saw that you had posted. I'm not meaning to laugh. I actually think it's pretty cool. I just laugh sometimes because that's a trigger of mine. But it's
I'm the same. I'm the
yeah,
same
I'm not
actually.
doing it to be disrespectful. You posted
Oh,
something that was
none
very
taken.
interesting.
I do the same. Don't none taken.
You posted something really interesting, and it's this photo on Mars. That's crazy, man. The one where that shows the path, it looks like a crash. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, that was actually a post from Chris Ramsey, and I just retweeted it. I found it really interesting, and we're gonna just keep seeing more and more pictures of Mars that are gonna puzzle
It,
us.
yeah, is Mars going to be the thing that like pushes us over the top? That's what I wonder sometimes.
I don't
Like
think it's a coincidence that Elon is so interested in Mars. It's not just because he wants to colonize it. I'm sure he knows a lot of stuff that he's not saying, you know?
but this is what's causing the issue there as well as with the introduction of sonics. I know we can't get too deep. We only got a few minutes left, but and then remote viewing is people are saying, well, why don't you just remote view up there and look at it? And I'm like, even if they did, would you trust what they said? I mean, I mean, even if I told you I could remote view and I was like, okay, I'm going to remote view this on Mars and I will tell you what it is. And I come back and I come to and I'm like, yeah, that was something metallic. It had this written on it. You're still going to say it was bullshit. So I mean, I don't really like that where people try to egg and get after the people who say they're a part of remote viewing. But I think that the pictures alone of some of these things that keep coming out from Mars, it's insane. This one right here, I don't know what to do with. But was that enhanced? Do you know if Chris did the AI enhancement on it that everybody hates that some of these people are doing?
Chris is usually very thorough,
Okay,
so I generally trust him. There's one that he posted a while ago that Joe Rogan reposted
yeah,
about Mars too, and that one
the square,
was enhanced. Yeah, the
the
one he
square was
posted was
enhanced.
enhanced. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. But
yeah.
even the non enhanced or unenhanced one was still convincing. I mean, you could
Does have
still
a pattern. Yeah, it does have a pattern.
yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then the only other one I thought to bring up was I didn't know if you saw Ryan Graves' announcement of the triangular UFO that was seen by 737 pilots. So I've been able to make some friends who are they're captains um, in commercial airline companies and well-known ones that we all fly with. And
Yeah,
when you start making friends that are pilots, one's a neighbor and the other one's just a friend of a friend type thing, and I got to talk to him about it. Um, you really realize that each one of these guys have something or gals. They have a
oh yeah,
story, and
oh
they
yeah.
are seeing things up there. So they're what Ryan Graves is doing. This could be massive because if he could ever come up with a system where these people could come forward, it would be. How is it that all these pilots I talked to, and one of them specifically, who's a captain for a major airline, he only has two sightings of all his flight time, and this guy's a zero bullshit guy. He has no he's one of those people like he doesn't care like if you like him or not. He didn't care to tell you a story or anything like that's not his thing. But when I heard his two UFO stories, like the one where he said he was at 40,000 feet, he's like nothing should be above me, right? Nothing's gonna fly over my head, and he said three red orbs came down from above him. So he's like, this would have been up above like 50, 60,000 feet. And they came down in a formation
Is this
that
the one from the East Coast? That
this
incident,
is
or is
this is just a guy who is a pilot who told me, and it's never made any kind of news. Um,
okay? Wow.
and he said when they came down in front and him and the co-pilot saw it, he said they just went straight back up. And they both looked at each other and they're like, what is that? I bring that up just to say, like, when you see this stuff, like what Ryan Graves is reporting and everything, I wish we could get to a system. I wish we could get to a system where
Yeah.
these guys could start feeding into a database.
I think that what the Tedesco brothers and what Skywatcher is doing could eventually become one of the tools that they use up there to like try and see things, and I think that's why people should read that paper that was just delivered yesterday on Skywatcher, because they're very thorough about a lot of these aspects of it and how they want to capture them and all that stuff on their sensors.
What else was he going to show? It wasn't just a Tic Tac, Ryan, or
He said a
Jake Barber
jellyfish.
jellyfish. That's right.
Yeah,
So that'll be something interesting to keep an eye on as well,
yep,
especially with Devin and I doing the UFO prophet stuff. We'll have to keep an eye on some of these things because if they do release this, will it corroborate some of what Corbell released last year with the jellyfish? I wish we could get the video of it coming back out of the water, right?
yeah. And we just like gotta wait like a 3 days, and that's it to get some of that footage
Yeah,
from Skywatcher.
April 7th. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and you know, this stuff about Tic Tac UFOs. Have you found any evidence of like what Stephen Greer is claiming that Fravor now knows that it was ours in America and it was, whatever they say, it's Lockheed or something like that, right? And he said, and he made a claim on one of his recent releases that Fravor now knows this, but I cannot find that anywhere. I can't
Yeah,
corrupt.
that one is kind of hard because there's a lot of debate surrounding that. What I can't tell you is that I know of another Tic Tac sighting that is way more recent than the OG one,
Okay.
and it happened over one of the carriers of the U.S. And I've spoken to one of the people who saw it from one of these carriers, and it is compelling. So, and it happened like in 2018, 2019, something like that. So that thing is still out there, whatever it is, and whoever's it is, it's
Yeah,
still
that
out.
was always my issue with it is that something that moves at those speeds, we I want to say this and believe it's true. We would never test that on a pilot without them knowing, right? What if we ripped his F-18 in half with it?
Oh, bro, who knows? If these guys have been keeping the secret for nearly 80 years, I would guess they would do anything to keep it.
Yeah, or then why not after the fact go to Fravor and just say you were part of a test. We didn't want you to know about it because we wanted to see how you would handle it operationally. We just
Yeah,
wanted to know how you react, and we wanted to gather that real time data. If we let you know about it, how can we capture the data on your response, the things you do, how your team reacts? Why not just read them in after the fact? That's what I tell
yeah,
people. Try to say, well, they were just testing on him, and I'm just like, they test stuff all the time. This isn't the first
yeah,
time that we've tested an aircraft. People get read in on things all the time, and they're told they can't talk about it. He never was, so that's
no.
that's where I get held up with that.
And he's like one of the most credible testimonies that I've ever seen on
Yeah,
any UFO. When I saw him on Rogan, I was like, this guy saw some shit.
yeah,
I was like, whoa. And that's what actually got me interested on a serious fashion on this topic,
yeah,
that interview.
yeah. It changed everything, and that's why I'm trying to hunt for that. I wish the next time someone gets access, are we ever going to see the Jesse Michaels, Dr. Greer interview? I,
He said it was coming, um,
I've heard
but I don't know
claims
when.
that he wasn't going to do it or something, that they
I
did
think,
record, but he wasn't going to release it.
oh man, I haven't heard that. That would be unfortunate. Because if that happened, that means it didn't go as well as Jesse thought. The one that I'm like looking forward to seeing is the one about Harold Malmgren. You know who that is?
Hmm.
No,
Say the
he's
last name again.
Malmgren.
Okay. No.
He's been very active recently, and he recently passed away, sadly. But
Okay.
his daughter is Dr. Pippa Malmgren. She recently wrote an article where she talks about because Harold was a presidential advisor for four presidents,
Okay.
including Kennedy and Johnson. And during the Cold War, he was the presidential advisor for Kennedy. And he's the one who stopped Curtis LeMay from nuking Russia.
Okay. Wow.
He's the one who negotiated. So he recently, like a few months before his passing, he started tweeting stuff about UFOs. And there's like a test called bluegill triple prime that Australian researcher Geoff Cruikshank has been reporting on his LinkedIn, and he wrote a piece for the Liberation Times about it, where this incident, and there's video that allegedly shows that a nuclear test in the air drops a UFO and it crashes, and allegedly um, Kennedy was seen in Los Alamos getting a briefing about that incident.
Hmm.
So people think that, and they're claiming that Kennedy was briefed on UFOs a few months before his passing. So that's really wild. And Harold was part of that during that time. So, and Jesse interviewed him before his passing. Like they spoke for hours, so I want to hear
Wow.
that. That's basically like a deathbed confession, in my opinion.
Yeah, those are some of the most interesting ones, if you ask me, because you know they feel they're at more free will to talk.
Yeah.
Because if someone comes in and says, "We'll take your life," okay,
And based on his position in the government and his history, man, the things the guy knew. So
yeah. Have you heard anything else about Age of Disclosure? When is that coming out?
I know that Dan Farrar is looking for theatrical distribution. No date yet, but as soon as I find out, I'll let you know.
Yeah, that would be cool because I think that's when there's some new faces in that one, right?
Yeah, a
Uh,
bunch.
that we've not heard of. I mean, there's some of the typical ones, but there's some new faces.
Yeah,
Isn't Clapper in that one?
yeah,
Yeah. So, and then there's already a discredit campaign underway.
yeah.
As soon as I saw Clapper was in it, it was all of a sudden I started seeing articles out there trying to
It always gets political, man. It always does.
All right. Well, Pavel, thank you so much for joining us today. We will catch up and talk again soon. I hope everyone enjoyed it, that you have some information now where you can go try dactyls. There's two different ones, .com or .org. Um, Both of them valid according to
Yeah,
Pavel, but you can go to the .org one and you can actually look up the bodies and read some of the
that's
evidence.
where
So,
the scientific data is. Yeah.
yeah. So hopefully you can go do it yourself. Now you have some information, but thank you for joining us today. Hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me, man. Bye,
Thanks.
people.
See ya.